tonight's session. If you prefer not to be on the recording, which
recording.
Okay, over to you, Belinda, and thank you for joining us today at WordPress Portsmouth.
Thank you. So yeah, this is a talk called Gutenberg for Editors. So it's kind of like a non-technical talk today on how editors can use the Gutenberg block editor. So block editor gives content creators more freedom to create layouts without programming knowledge. However, there's still a steep learning curve on how to use the block editor efficiently. In this talk, we'll provide an overview of the block editor in WordPress 5.5, as well as answering any questions on how to use a block editor with your site. Oops. So a little bit of history. Why we're even having a conversation about this is in the past we just had one text box, which was fine for kind of basic word processing. But as soon as you added a few images in there and had more complex layouts, it kind of got a bit of a nightmare. And so then a lot of plugins and a lot of other developers came up with lots of solutions to the problem. So you've got kind of like page builders like Element or Beaver Builder or Divi, and you've also got like custom meta box generators like Advanced Custom Fields, which developers use to kind of make the editing a bit easier and kind of like make complex layouts more possible. So there are a couple of disadvantages with these methods. You are kind of tied into using these solutions. So if that plugin that you've chosen is switched off, then the content is usually either broken or no longer editable. All page and theme builders solve these problems in different ways. So there's kind of no consistency between the different builders. And some, but not all, kind of like slow websites down considerably, adding a lot of extra JavaScript and CSS. And I have seen sites with like 2 or 3 page builders on there, which they can't get rid of because of old content. So that's kind of a bit more of a nightmare as well. And so also like there's quite a few security vulnerabilities on various page builders that has been in the past. So Matt Mullenberg from Automatic kind of introduced the Gutenberg plugin in 2017 to create a WordPress way of solving these same issues. And it was first merged into WordPress in December 2018, although the plugin still continues to be available on the plugins repository if you want to try out new features that aren't currently in the main WordPress. So the first thing we're going to look at is what is actually a block. So a block is kind of a self-contained input area that creates an element on a web page, such as a heading, an image, or some more complex layouts, such as galleries, cover images, and things like that. But it's called kind of like a self-contained component within an area of a web page. So how do we add a block? There's a few different ways you can add a block, and the easiest way, probably when you're typing, is if you know the name of the block you want, you can use the / name of the block hotkey, and that's easy to add that block in. You can also find a plus button in the kind of content area, which allows you to click and add a block. And there's also a plus button on the top left-hand corner of the screen. So I'm just going to skip this and have a look at the Gutenberg editor. And so I'll go through the different ways of doing that. So if you're just typing along here, you can add a new block by pressing / and then I know I want a heading, so I'm going to start typing in heading. And there we've got a heading block. Next option is this little plus symbol here, and that's kind of in the main content area, kind of at the bottom of the content, and you've also kind of got them between blocks sometimes, but they're kind of harder to get at sometimes, you see there. So you can click on that, and then here you've kind of got some of the most frequently used blocks. If you don't see the block you want, you can press on Browse All, and they'll appear at the side like that. And lastly, you've got a plus button right at the top, and this is always going to add the block at the bottom of the page. So this one, kind of this plus button here, you can put it in there and say you want a image. That will insert an image from your media library, and that's kind of where you kind of click that. But if you click on the plus at the top and say we wanted some bullet points, some lists, Oh, that's actually, that kind of, it used to go to the bottom, but now apparently it's does it where your mouse is, so that's probably a bit better. So those are three main areas of how to add a block. And I guess I'll ask, has anybody actually got any questions before we move on to the next section? Is there anything in the chat? Nope. Okay,
No,
well,
not at the moment, Belinda.
Cool. So the next thing we're going to look at is how to find a block. So you know you want to add a block, but how do you find the block that you want if you don't know what it's called? So blocks are kind of all associated with various categories. The first category is kind of text, so this is where you'll find a simple WordPress setting blocks such as paragraph, headings, and lists. The next section is media, and this is like where you'll find galleries, video, and audio blocks. So kind of all kind of media and things. Next section we're going to look at is widgets. So widgets are blocks that you would normally find in the widgets area of a normal WordPress install. So you've kind of got things like categories, custom HTML, and calendar and things like that. And then like we've got a section called design. So that's kind of things that you might need to like make the design look a bit better, like buttons, spaces, page breaks, groups, columns, and things like that. And then lastly, for native blocks, we've got embeds. So embeds are content that you can pull in from other websites, such as Twitter and YouTube or other WordPress sites. So you've got those like a variety of different embeds you can use from various different providers. And lastly, there's kind of a MISC thing. So every plugin developer and theme developer has the opportunity to add their own section, and that's usually at the end of the list. So you can see an example here. You've got a Yoast block, and so they've kind of put that right at the end, and you can choose that if you want to use some Yoast blocks as well. So we're going to take a quick look at that. We can see here we've got all the blocks in the various sections, and sometimes some of them will be added in here as well. And at the bottom you can see we have got the Yoast structured data block. And also, if you are looking for a block, you can search for a block up here if you kind of know the name. Like, say we're looking for bullet points, it will come up with list, even though it's not in the title, because it has some keywords associated with it. That's another handy way to look for a block if you can't find it. Oh yeah, forgot about that. And the last thing I want to say about where to find block categories is there's also a good support article about every single different category and which blocks you can find in each category and what they all do. So this is kind of like a useful resource if you're getting started with the various blocks. Now we're going to look at how to move a block, and there are several ways to move a block. It is a little tricky sometimes. I find the easiest way is arrows in the top left-hand corner of the block, where you click on it. You can copy and paste a block. You can use the move to functionality, which is newish functionality. Or if everything's going wrong, you can use the code editor to just copy and paste blocks like you did in the old editor when things went funny. So I'll show you those options here. So say I wanted to move my heading block down. Oh, that's the heading of the page, sorry. So I want to move my image block down. I just have to click on the arrows and move it up and down. And then if I want to do the same thing, I can copy and paste it. So this is very handy, this little block navigation up here. It lets you select various blocks on the page. And so I know I've got image blocks that's selected there. I can select it and press Control X. Oh, hang on, I can do copy. And then I can paste it somewhere else. Is that not working? Oh yeah, there you go. So I pasted that, and then you can delete this, or and I think one of the other options is move to, that's quite a cool option. So you click on the block, you can click on move to, and then it's very difficult to see, but there's like a line at the top. You can see that grey line's come up, and if you move it down, you can see there's a blue line. And wherever that blue line is, once you press return and you're happy, you can move that block to that location. And so this kind of works for most things as well. And try the heading, move the heading between the two images. It is a bit slow. So you can see we've got a blue line between the two images. If I press return, the heading is now between the two images. And lastly, if everything has gone wrong and you get really confused, you can go to this section here, click on the three little dots, go to Code Editor. And you can see here you've got all the blocks as code. So we've got a paragraph tag right at the top, and say you wanted that at the bottom, but you couldn't move it in any other way. You can cut it and then put it right at the bottom. And then when you go back to the visual editor, you can see that block is now at the bottom. And those are kind of the main ways to move blocks. Has anybody got any questions about that? No? Got any comments? No? Okay, I'll move on to the next section, which is how to delete a block. So there's not as many ways to delete a block as there is to move on. Probably the easiest way I find is to remove the block from the UI navigation, or you can also use backspace on a keyboard, but that doesn't work too well sometimes. So we'll take a look at both of those options in the editor. So say I don't really want this block anymore, I can click on it, click on the two little dots. I've got various options here, and I will put remove block, and that block is now gone. If I wanted to delete a block, this kind of works better with text, doesn't work so well with images. Just keep pressing backspace, block's gone. Another block's gone. Doesn't work as well with some things like some layout options, so you may have to just use it's easiest just to kind of like select it through there, and then you've got the three dots where you want, and then just delete, move. Anybody got any questions about that before we move on to the next section? No? Yeah, so now we'll look at like block options. So there are a variety of places to change block options. The main place is in the right-hand sidebar. There's also like a toolbar at the top of the block, which you can often change options there. And inside the block itself sometimes gives you the opportunity to change options, especially for things like images and things like that. So we'll kind of have a look at the various different options that you can use. So for every block, this is the heading block here, you click on it and you get the options that come up. So each block has different options, like the list block has got different options to the heading block. And here you've got a few different options. You can choose on the toolbar, there's the toolbar at the top. You can choose what heading you want. So you can have a H1 or up down to H6. You can you can make the whole thing bold or less bold. You can make things italic. Got a little toolbar. You can add a link. And you can also do some other fun things like superscript. And you can also, this is quite cool, this is quite new as well, you can also change the text colour of just that individual piece of text. Oh, is it not working now? Oh.
Probably in the front end.
It was working earlier. I don't know why. It's not working now. Oh, weird. Strange. Don't know what that's. So, oh yeah, there you go. Now it's working. So you can see it is sometimes a little bit buggy, as you can see. There's also options here for text color and background color. So this is for the entire block. So if I wanted to change the text color, I do that. And if I wanted to change the background color to something that looks a bit hideous, we can. Doesn't mean you should. And then like basically every other block has got different options. We can have a quick look at the quote block. So this has got a few different options here. It's got all the same text options that we had before. It's also kind of got left and kind of aligns left, right, and centre. I think the heading of the block had as well, but I forgot to show it you. And it's also got these styles, so you can add block styles in, and this is like a large style quote or a smaller style quote. And not every block has block styles, but they are quite fun to use. We'll have a look at another block. Possibly we'll have a look at an image block. Just put on the media library. And this one's got quite a few options. It's got some new options, but one of the things you could do is like make a rounded block like that. You can give it alternate text if you want to overwrite the alternate text in the admin area. You can change the size of the block, so you can change it to the various sizes you've got registered with your theme, which is quite cool. Or you can give it a custom size here, which let's give it 500. That's kind of squashed it, so that's not great, but you can squash it if you want. You can also do things like 50%, 25%, 100%. That's quite cool. And then this is really cool. This is just fairly new. You've got your crop options, so you can kind of give it a ratio. So I wanted 60 ratio, and you can move that around. And then you can kind of crop that image so it's got that particular ratio, which I think is pretty cool. And also rotate it if you want to. Not sure you'd want to. We can make it square. You can apply that. I think it's just pretty cool what you can do now with that block. Have another look at something like a gallery. So we'll just have, don't know why I've got so many same images in there. Insert a gallery. And then you can add more images to it. And you've got various different options here, so you can have a gallery with 1 column or 2 column. You can have all the images cropped or not. And you have various sizes as well. And you can also move them left and right as well with a little left and right arrow. And you can add more options. Write your gallery caption in there. The same little toolbar you got with all your text. Lastly, I'm just going to look at some columns. So this gives you the option of having columns with different widths and things like that to begin with. So we're going to choose 50-50. We can just add some text in there. And we add an image in there. And then you can also, if you want to change that, you can go up here and click on your columns block. You can see you've got some settings for the column. So you can actually have put a third one or a fourth one in there if you decide to change your mind. The columns block also has various options. So if you click on the column, you can give it percentage width. So let's give that a, probably want to give that one not much room, but then make the image a lot bigger. And you can also kind of delete columns as well. So if you don't want that anymore, you can just remove that column, and then it just becomes a 1-column block. Right, is there any other demos people would like?
We've had a couple of comments, Belinda. So Johnny was talking about the crop thing in the image is very cool as well. So he's echoing your own one there. Nikki asked, with regards to things like the headings, the H1s and H2s, if you make changes, well, first of all, can you make a change to the default setting for those headings, as in the size? And if not, the changes that you made with color and things, is that just for that block, or is that then throughout the site?
No, that would be just for that block. So all these blocks are kind of just those individual blocks. And generally for blocks, apart from one thing we'll come on to reusable blocks, it will just be for that particular block that you've made the changes for. And so you can't really set a default size that's different, because that's like a theme thing. You'll be able to do it in a theme.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you.
But you can give it a special size if you want to change the size here. So you've got preset size, you've got various sizes that preset already, and then you can choose like 60 or something. But that would only apply to that particular block, it wouldn't be site-wide.
Lovely, thank you. And with regards to when you crop the image, there is a little bit going on in the chat there, but just for the people that aren't reading the chat, does the crop only apply for that one post, or does it change the image in the media library?
No, you can actually see it's actually made new images. You can see in the media library, which I was kind of a bit confused about at first. It has made a few different images, I think, a few different sizes for that. So you can reuse that one, but it's not touch the original.
Lovely, brilliant.
But yeah, so that will just be for that block, I think. Well, unless you want to reuse it elsewhere, I guess.
Yeah. And I guess if you cropped it again in that second post, you'd then get like a third copy of it as well.
I think so, yeah, but I haven't actually tried that out. It was fairly a new feature, so I haven't used it very much, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I must admit, I hadn't seen it up until you showed it, so lovely, thank you.
So just for workflow, it's easier if you go back into your media library, and then if you need to rename any of the additional images, if you want to use them elsewhere, it can be easier to do that at that stage.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
I suppose it's just like if you're doing things on the fly as well. If you're just using an image that you know want in one or two places, you can kind of see it in context as well, which is quite cool. Any other questions in there?
Yeah, Belinda, could you talk a bit about how, when you have multiple columns, how the responsiveness is dealt with? How do you know what it's going to do when you start?
Yeah, that's kind of like in the theme author CSS. I think Gutenberg does actually do some standard blocks, so do some standard CSS that it's kind of outputs.
So okay, so it has some standard media queries or something, does it?
Yeah, I think so. So I think there is actually the option as well to where was it now? There was an option where you can see the preview, and then you can see it on various mobile.
So you can see what it's going to do.
You can see what it's going to look like, yeah, on a mobile things. So that's what the page is going to look like on a mobile. Look and preview on a tablet. You can see what it's going to do, but it's kind of like up to theme author. That's kind of where theme authors come in as well sometimes. I think there is some kind of like styles out of the box as well that kind of like handle basic things like that.
Yeah, no, I live in Divi most of the time, so you know, this is something that I don't touch very often, other than sort of adding posts and things. So
yeah,
so let the styling live elsewhere. So
just on the 2021 theme that will be part of 5.6, that is really ready out of the box. So if you use something like Divi already, then you'll find the new 2021 theme and how Gutenberg works in that so much easier to use.
excellent, that'll be good.
Can I just ask Belinda, what theme are you using?
So this is 2020.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you. I missed that bit at the beginning.
Oh, I didn't say it explicitly.
Oh, did you? Okay, whatever.
It doesn't really, yeah, it's just like any theme, but any theme, you could use any theme that says it supports Gutenberg.
Yeah.
You should be okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
I think just a comment from me. I have found that because the content area in 2020 is so narrow,
Yeah,
I've noticed that if you are using a different theme where it's a little wider, what you're going to see is going to be more different than
yeah,
if you're, because 2020 is very opinionated about the
yeah,
width of the content.
yeah,
So I'm eager to see 2021. I think it's going to be a really exciting and fun
yeah.
use.
Everybody's looking forward to seeing that. Yeah, definitely.
I've got 2021 here if you want to see it later.
Oh, great. Yeah, we'll see that. We got it. Cool.
Belinda, are you going to be talking about reusable blocks at all?
Yes, in a bit. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay.
Yeah.
So a question from Meg, that's also.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. So I'll, go through reusable blocks in a minute. Just wanted to kind of go slowly and make sure everybody had all
Oh, absolutely.
the
Yeah. No, that's fine.
as I went. So yeah. And so yeah. So next bit we're going to look at is kind of installing a new block, because sometimes you might have some needs that some of the native blocks don't kind of give you. So you can actually search for additional blocks from within the block editor. And there's also, if you search the WordPress plugin directory for plugins with a suite of blocks, there's often like whole suites of blocks that give you more options, things like that, because at the moment Gutenberg isn't, like, to be honest, it's not like completely fully featured compared to some of the page builders that are out there. So we're just going to have a quick look at how you can, while you're working as a busy editor, while you're working and you just need to find a block that you haven't got. So if you're looking for a block and you type in, oh, I'd really like a carousel block. Ooh. And then it'll look in the blocks plugin directory, and if it finds one, then you can click on add block, and there you go. So then you can add in a carousel block to the theme and just start editing straight away. That's all you have to do. Obviously, if you're doing it from the plugin directory, you just install a plugin in kind of the normal way. I think the next slide is just telling you how to uninstall a block. So if you've kind of installed a carousel block here, but you say you don't like it, you think, well, I might get rid of that one. You can't, unfortunately, uninstall it from that page. You have to go into your plugins.
It should do it.
They probably will in the future, yeah. But at the moment, you have to go into plugins and press deactivate and then delete that block. I've lost all my stuff. Probably. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Autosave, you can recover from autosave.
It's okay, because I'm going to talk about block patterns. Right, so this is kind of something that's fairly new as well. So block patterns are a list of common design patterns for building web pages. So you're not kind of like faced with a blank screen. So editors can choose a pattern and modify the pattern to suit them. So you're not kind of like forced to stick with that pattern. If you find one that's almost right, you can modify it. And it is better than staring at a blank page when you're writing. So get rid of that writer's block. And there's kind of like some resources now where you can find various other block patterns that are different from the standard ones that are kind of come bundled with WordPress. That might be worth looking into if you're interested in that kind of thing. So now we're going to look at the block patterns. So this is kind of like a new section. So we've got blocks as the first tab in this plus arrow, and then the second one we've got patterns. And here's like you've got various block patterns that you can choose. So say you want a heading with 2 columns, you can click on that. And then you've got a heading and 2 columns, and you can obviously change everything. You can change the text, change the colours. You're not kind of stuck with what they've given you. You want that smaller or a different colour, you can easily do that. Change it to blue. So there's quite a few you can choose from. Block patterns. We've got various things like buttons. Add some buttons down there. We can have some things like a gallery, or even excitingly, you can have things like a think my internet's just running a bit slow. Have things like a large heading with some image on the back. And you can kind of customize things however you like. So you can make that full width and move it to the top. I think it's just a pretty cool way of kind of like starting a website if you're not quite sure where to begin, because these are kind of like common things you see every day on pretty much every website, and you can just like modify it and make it your own. So has anybody got any questions about block patterns? Over here. Cool.
I just had a comment that I have in the past been quite successful using them for like calls to action, particularly if you don't want to use like a big heavy plugin for firing off analytics events. You can just add a little class onto there, save that call to action, and then fire off your events by using it as a reusable block. And that's pretty lightweight way of doing that versus like
installing a whole plugin to do it. Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I think. That's kind of like one of the things that Gutenberg's trying to solve, is like not having to install a plugin just for doing things that, because obviously the web has evolved quite a lot since it first was released. So 20 years ago? No, 20 years ago, 15 years ago,
18.
maybe.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So so I think it did need to kind of evolve and get with the times in that way. Even though Gutenberg has been a bit controversial at times, but yeah. Anyway, I'm going to update that page now. Next on the list is reusable blocks. So reusable blocks are another cool feature that they've been around since the first release, I think. So this is a nice feature if you're using the same information over and over again. For example, author details. So this lets you set up a block once, and if information needs to be updated, it will be basically changed everywhere. So basically, it's quite easy to set up a block. Say I wanted to grab this, and or say let's do your option of doing some reusable button blocks. So you can change that to say I don't know, download now for free PDF, and link to your free PDF. If you wanted to kind of like make that into a block pattern, you could select the buttons, and you've got the 3 dots, and you can just say add to reusable blocks. You can do that call to action, and then you can just save that. And then if you wanted to have the same call to action maybe further down the page, because you're a marketer, you can go to your plus arrow and then go to blocks, patterns, and then reusable, the last one. You can see that's the one we've got there. So we call that call to action. It's kind of got like a little preview there, as you can see, and then you click on that. Oh, and that's exactly the same block. You can't actually edit it from here. It's very confusing. You can only edit the name. But if you kind of like realize you've made a mistake and you actually meant to change the button text, it's quite easy to change. If you to go, oh, hang on, let me just update this page first. So these are changes. You should go to manage all reusable blocks. Go to your call to action, and then click on that. So this is like a normal WordPress editor, and maybe I want to say is or join my mailing list. And you have to press update like you would a normal post. These are basically normal posts, but just with one like small section in them. And then go back to that page, and we can see this is changed there, and it's also changed there. And the cool thing about that is as well, you can actually export reusable blocks. If you go there, you can see you can export it as JSON and reuse them across multiple sites if you have more than one site, which is a pretty cool feature, I think. Anybody got any questions about reusable blocks? Nope.
Nikki was asking, are all of these available even if you have different themes?
Yeah, so if your theme supports Gutenberg, these should all be available to you. Pretty much. So there's some things that may not be available if, like, some of these align wides sometimes not available, or if a particular theme has decided that they don't want to allow you to use a certain block, they can they do have the freedom to register that particular block. But most themes wouldn't normally do that. So I guess you just have to find out on the theme.
Yeah.
But
normally, if it's in Gutenberg, then it's very likely that you probably get it in your theme.
Yes, yeah, it's very likely you'll get all these features, and especially things like reusable blocks. I don't think there's a way of disabling that. I don't think there's a way, or not. Yeah. So
Fab. Thank you.
cool. And the next thing, come back to my screen. I'm going to look at is the future. So the Gutenberg is kind of a plugin that's actually being actively developed right now. So if you want to install and see some of the new things that come in, you can install the Gutenberg plugin and see experimental features, but it's probably not good for live sites because some of them are still a bit buggy. So some of the things that I kind of like in development at the moment is adding a block editor to the widget section, which I've using is pretty cool. Creating menus using blocks, which I've used and is not very cool. And the end goal for the Gutenberg is like full site block editing, but I think that's kind of a way off down the path, but it's coming. And so I'm just going to switch Gutenberg editor on in case anybody's curious. So we have got the Gutenberg plugin installed, and then we can see in the widgets, this is an experimental feature, but I think it's pretty cool. We've got like your normal standard widgets here, but it's actually like a content area. You can add your own Gutenberg block. So you can click on that, and then you can basically add any kind of normal Gutenberg block that you like. That'll be in the widget area. And then there's also kind of like these normal standard widgets that you see, and then you've kind of got a preview section as well, an edit section. So these are the standards like widgets you'd see in any normal kind of widget section. So I think that's pretty cool. And then you've also got full site editing available, which is really buggy and keeps giving me errors. But yeah, it will be pretty cool because you can also add menu items or things here, which you can link to various posts, or you can do things like do a social icon, which I think it's going to be pretty cool once it's done, but we're not there yet. So how do we go back? Right. WordPress. Oh yeah, it's doing weird things here. So that's kind of the future of Gutenberg. I'm going to switch it off. Has anybody got any questions about that? Or any comments? Probably more. What's the point?
I do. Question. Okay. So can a theme developer then define, just as we define widget areas now, will the block editor just automatically go in, different instances of the block editor go right in there, or do we know yet?
With you. I think, yeah, I mean, at the moment it seems to be like stuck to the widget section, I think. But I'm not sure how they're going to do it in the future, especially when the full site editing becomes available. It kind of feels like.
I know that there's a way you can just instantiate other block editors, because I've done that before. What I don't know is, like, when you're developing a theme, I'll look it up and I'll find it and I'll
sorry, I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I'll figure it out and I'll put it somewhere. Abba will tell me where to put it, but or she probably knows the answer. But I know you can instantiate other block editors. What I don't know is if you're a theme developer and you just old school way like define other widget areas.
Yeah, I'm assuming there's kind of like it'll kind of like still pick that up unless they're throwing all that out.
I would think so.
I mean, like there was all the Gutenberg stuff, and the widget thing was a separate section. But whether they're going to keep that long term, I don't know. Once full block editing is going to be a thing. I don't know.
I suspect as a theme editor, when you instantiate a new sidebar or a new widget area, you will probably have the choice as to whether you can let Gutenberg be an editor or not, because for some themes it probably wouldn't work as well, depending on where the widget area was. You know, if it was sort of like a small section of a page, you might not want people sort of adding loads of extra blocks into it. So again, it's down to that idea that a theme editor will often create a theme for people who don't want to spend the time creating their own site. They just want to post content. But I guess, you know, people are going to become more and more used to being able to use Gutenberg to do full site editing. So you'll find most widget areas will be allowable.
Right. Well, you can't really keep, you know, not filling them up with junk. Just happens.
Exactly. And it's your choice, isn't it? It's your site. If you want something
It's your
there, you have
site.
something.
Not ruin your own
Yeah.
site. Nothing in the world.
Right. And I will rump to myself.
And that's
at
Johnny's
home.
just like, no, I'm a designer. Cool. So I think we're just going to finish. I've just got one slide left. So I think a lot of people were asking whether should I be using Gutenberg? A couple of slides actually. So there's obviously there's kind of been questions like, should I stop using my page builder and should I use Gutenberg's? But like many things, there's no right or wrong answer. It just kind of depends on what your needs are. So the advantage of using Gutenberg are kind of a more consistent UI for developers to hook into, and also less of a learning curve when adding new plugins. So it's usually kind of got a more intuitive interface compared to some page builders, although if you're used to a page builder, perhaps that's not a big issue for you. Web page is usually faster than many page builders because you can add a lot of like JavaScript and CSS to the front end. And new features will be added all the time, so the ecosystem will grow, and so it will be more fully featured in the future. It's not as fully featured as other page builders at the moment. And it's kind of not tied to one framework, so as it's all native to WordPress, which is kind of an advantage. Yeah, have anybody got any? We did have quite a lot of questions through there. I thought there was a disadvantage slide. Oh yeah, sorry, there's some disadvantages as well as using Gutenberg. So I'll just go through those. Those are supposed to be first. Yeah, so like I said, it's not as fully featured as page builders, and the ecosystem is not as fully developed. And there are still some things in a state of flux. Every time there's a new release, things change slightly, which is a little bit annoying. So yeah, that was Gutenberg for editors. I'll take any extra questions that anybody has.
Yes, I've got the questions written down, and when I get back onto our slides, I can put them up there, or I can read them all out if you like. Which would you prefer?
You can read them. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Go on, then.
Do you want to put them up?
I'm trying to share a screen here, but I can't do it now.
You were.
What's being shared? Anything?
Yeah.
Yes, your
That's
screen.
yours now. Some of tonight's questions.
Right. Okay. So. Now what can you see?
Yeah, you can see the screen.
Is that the full screen one or not? No.
No, but it's readable.
All right then, hold on. If I just stop it and try again. How about that one? How about that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before I do this, thank you very much, Belinda, for your super speedy introduction to WordPress block editor with all the bits that you could cover in the time available. Some questions that came from the RSVP question that I put into the meetup was, what do you want to learn about you want to know about drag and drop, working with column groups, columns, colors, or something else? Well, you've done columns, you've done colors. I didn't do drag and drop, and I know why. And you didn't necessarily do groups.
Oh, I can do groups if you want,
but that's fine, because that might be an advanced thing. Groups, is groups how it works in the patterns? Probably not, but it's one way of making patterns, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the way the reusable blocks works. So going on to the questions, galleries and columns. We've covered galleries briefly and columns. Everyone happy with that?
Yeah, I did have, well, it was actually me that wrote that just because of the subjects, but one question about columns, coming from in the bad old days, a word processing background and a page layout background, one of the most common things you did was actually flow text from one column into the next column.
Yeah.
You can still do that.
So you can have one piece of text, and if you edit the text in the first column, it will readjust itself out of the second column into the first column, will it? Because I haven't managed to make Gutenberg do that.
Sorry, what's that? So
well, if you've got two columns of text, and say you delete a word or delete a paragraph in the first column, does it all shuffle up, which is what it would do if you were, in any normal sort of typesetting or any. If you're writing an article and it's in 3 columns and you edit something in the first column, the text should just move up.
Yeah, it doesn't do that because I think that's like, it doesn't like the word wrap. It's not like built for word wrap.
No.
So it'd be interesting to get a block where you could do like word wrap. You can do
CSS thing, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that would be simple to do in CSS actually. You just need a block and.
But there's no link between the blocks, is there? A block is
not word link, but I think the column's more for layouts. So it's not like, because most people don't read information like that on the web up and down. Most people read it up to down like that, but not kind of like that, like an old newspaper. So
but it's also
no, but there's
it's also
lots of...
so that the page can be responsive. So if you and the columns can actually move as you need them to, depending on what device you're using.
Yeah.
So you can group, and I think Andrew had a really good little demo that showed how you put blocks within blocks, and you can do it that way as well.
No,
okay.
Answer the question about the flowing in columns, other than.
So I think you answer your question. It's not like set up to do that, because that's not the way.
You can do it in CSS.
You can do it in CSS.
Yeah, and in CSS is probably a better way of doing it.
Yeah. No, I know there's ways around it, but I guess it's if you're sort of looking at trying to have a client who just wants to edit copy, and there's quite a lot of. I take the point about it being web rather than print, but there's a lot of magazine style type sites, and copy editors are used to editing copy and copy flowing into columns as they edit it. I can see Meg frantically nodding away. So,
yeah,
I am, because also, Paul, to your point,
to create a block like that. So maybe you can put it in suggestions, or someone can create.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And
very easy.
And suggestions are being taken already now for the next release 5.7.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have to get it out. Because, Paul, to your point, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with using InDesign, but a lot of people, like magazine type people, are familiar with that tool. And so I think that in terms of being consistent with UX, we should probably, as the core editor team are talking about and thinking about that, we should be talking about how that UX works, because it's actually pretty friendly. I mean, it just, the little plus sign turns red and you just drag it.
Like that, yeah.
And that goes back. That goes back to, I hate to say, 30 years ago when I was using Quark Express and things, and that's how they all work.
Yeah, but the web's never worked like that. The web's never worked like that.
I know, but
it hasn't, but it can now with React.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, right? One other thing I have
it could. You're right. It could now.
It could. We're so coming a long way. It's like we're graduating. But the one thing that I found, and I don't know, I wanted to ask if I'm the only one, but I find it frustrating when, particularly as a theme designer, if I'm like, I don't want my front end of my site to look, it should look the same, you know, on the back side and the front side, but there's a lot of work involved in making it that way. And I think that for theme developers, but also for just users, I think that I think we have to be paying attention to that. I think it's very, very important. And I don't know, is that a question, or am I the only one? But
well,
I feel like
Gutenberg has kind of helped to do that, because before it was like literally meta boxes, you know, like
I know
back end and the front end didn't look.
And I think
like
when you get to full site editing, I think you'll
Yeah.
find that will answer that sort of question, Meg, because when people want to go and make the changes, they are actually making the change on the front end. So you'll be seeing exactly what the viewer's going to see. The trouble with making the back end work like that as well is we often have lots of things like meta boxes that are telling us SEO rankings and whether the post has been published or not. So you've got lots of other information on the side of the screen. So it's difficult, because if you were to have, say, a very dark theme, all of those boxes would need to be able to respond and react to that as well.
it is difficult, but not impossible.
Oh, absolutely not impossible.
And so I
not.
think that that's just like, you know, we set the bar as high as we can, and then we try to react to that. As you know, I know for me, I mean, I've got a little Gutenberg ready development theme in development, and it drives me bonkers. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to make this better. I need to. Sorry about the baby crying. That's just par for the course here in my house.
No problem.
But just to reiterate, if everybody's got any ideas about what they'd like to see in full site editing, if they have things that they would like to see that's different, including, you know, having text that flows, then every time we get to an end of a release, they start inviting suggestions for the next one. And it's really important to put your views forward and explain, give them screenshots, show them as much as possible about what you'd like to see, or even volunteer to help build it. There's lots of help and lots of support.
I think someone else asked when we were talking, when Belinda was giving her presentation, about the responsiveness of the columns block. And I think that there's still more conversation to be had around that a little bit, because the theme does play a part in that. So I think that maybe, Belinda, you could like elaborate a little bit more for me and for everyone else. Like, I don't think it always behaves exactly the way that you expect it to, because the theme is in the middle of that conversation, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, obviously, especially with breakpoint, if the content's quite narrow, then things are going to look different to if the content's quite wide. And so the theme author, if you get a decent theme with a decent theme author, they should test the blocks and make sure the breakpoints, change the breakpoints to make them different. And then if hopefully add the CSS on the back end as well, so you know what you're seeing on the back end too. Johnny's like saying, yeah, it's the life of the theme author. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's just kind of like down to theme, like the theme and the theme author to do, because there's still a lot of work that goes into doing that as well. You can't, it's not like plug and play out of the box. No. But.
Right. Question here about I don't use it at the moment. My theme Evolve doesn't. I think I should change my theme and use Gutenberg. Anyone know about Evolve, apart from the asker question?
One I've used before. I mean, the sort of thing to that, I guess, would be if you can set up a second site or a copy of your site and see how you get on. Because if you can find that you can do everything you want to do in Gutenberg, then yeah, maybe it is a point that you choose to come away from Evolve, especially if you're finding any frustrations with that theme. But equally, if what you're using at the moment works for you, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to come across and use Gutenberg. You know, just wait until something appears there that you definitely want to use, and then that's the point where you think, okay, there's always going to be a learning curve moving from one system to another. So you just need to take that into consideration.
In each of the WordPress releases as well, various versions of Gutenberg get incorporated. So, and they become standard as part of the core editor. So, and most of the themes will work with that as well, and they do get time to update. So it's a good way of actually learning a bit more about how Gutenberg works without actually having to use the plugin.
Didn't you miss the best question, surely, on that sheet, Herb?
Yeah.
Why is it better than Elementor? Or
Oh,
is
yes. Yes, sorry. Yes.
I think I did cover
That's a
that.
gem of a question, surely. Don't miss it out, buddy.
It's different to Elementor. So it depends on what your needs are. Like I say, if you're comfortable using Elementor and
I
it
only
hasn't got as
discovered.
many, and Gutenberg hasn't got the features you want, then I guess stick with Elementor for now.
Wow, what a diplomatic answer. Surely someone's got a more controversial response than that.
But
Yeah, what's
Elementor,
Elementor? Sorry.
Age building.
Elementor, even with the latest version of WordPress 5.5, you can actually do more now with Elementor using 5.5, which has quite a lot of Gutenberg.
Has disappeared.
Gutenberg is by the time we commit the release. And so you'll find that what Elementor can do now within the WordPress environment is a lot more in 5.5 than it can do 5.4. And that's because WordPress has incorporated much more of the Gutenberg within that into its core offer. So they are different. I think actually it's a fair answer from Belinda that they are different things. And it depends what you need. And I think Herb's point is really important. If you are comfortable with something and it works for you, and then there's no reason to change it as long as it's being updated.
And I think Drew made a really good point on that same note, Abba, is that if you have a business process that is a large team and they have a workflow in place,
yeah,
making a change to that business system isn't necessary because something shiny comes out in WordPress. Like you have to really think about the upset that you're imparting to the user groups and how large the organization is and how long that transition will take. We mentioned, I have a newspaper client and she keeps asking me like, why can't I use Gutenberg? Why can't I? Was like, because you've got a whole business system in place that's working for you. So let's talk about the investment in time, in training, in development that it's going to take to shift that whole business system, aside from the technology. So I think it's important to note that we have to be thinking not just about technology, but also about those bigger conversations. And Drew was the one who really pointed that out very eloquently. And I just wanted to reinforce that as well.
Very, very true. And quite often when clients say they want to use Gutenberg, actually, they are using the block editor, which is what they actually mean. And they don't realize that actually the core versions they're using in WordPress are using most of the features that are currently available in Gutenberg at the time of the release. So, but it's doing whatever your business needs and being able to take people with you is really important. But that's why it's very important too that developers are involved in the conversation. And we've produced, as part of the Make teams, question and answers that are constantly evolving. Meg's been part of that, Olga, Herb's given some input into that, Terry has, Andrew has. And so all of people's inputs are really important. And the more as developers, content managers, whatever we do within the WordPress ecosystem, we can actually have a voice and start looking at what is coming out and start looking at how does that help me? How does that impact my business, my clients? The more we can get ahead of the game and we can influence what is coming out. And Olga will probably be able to put a link in the chat to where you'll find the questions and answers, a bit more about 5.5 if you haven't already updated to it, that we presented in this meetup last month. Some social media promotions just to help you if you're to explain to your clients what 5.5 does. Thank you, Olga. And if you come across a new question, let us know and we'll try and find an answer and add it to it. I think
there was a new question.
Herb,
wasn't me putting those.
do you want to take that?
There. Sorry, what?
Do you want to take the one that had question marks all over it?
Well, I was the one that wrote it anyway, so I thought I was saying it, but I was on mute when the presentation was going on, so it was all my questions that I asked whilst it was going on were missed. But the question, what happens if you accidentally delete a block? Is you undo it.
Yep.
And what happens if you can't undo it? You could quit.
There's usually a history, isn't there, or
Okay.
something? So it depends how.
Sorry?
There's usually versions at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
I don't know if they got rid of that, but I haven't seen.
No, you've still got revisions. Unfortunately, what you see in the revisions, of course, is the Gutenberg source, and that might be meaningless to you if you happen to not have ever written HTML. But you can always try playing with it.
It's a good point, because I never thought about that before.
You can always go to the last revision and then you keep going back until you find it.
Yeah. But
and maybe because we've got Chris on the call tonight, maybe Chris, that's something that we need to add to the questions and answers about what happens if you accidentally delete a block.
Well, so these questions that we got on this slide are ones that had been asked before, or some that were actually asked live. There were some more questions, but we thought they were a bit more detailed and not the sort of thing that we want to talk about for editors. So potentially we can talk about these things in the future. And a question that came from Brad, and I haven't seen Brad on here, was how to use the block editor with ACF. Now, I'm not the person to answer that. Johnny, Belinda, anyone else?
Yeah, I can give you a 5p's worth on that because it's
right.
Well, I've been playing around with.
Can we do that on another time? Because
yeah, sure. Yeah, no worries.
I don't think the person who asked the question is here to hear the answer.
In a nutshell, it's cool. Check it out. Dace.
Yeah. And should I have stopped recording by now?
Not necessarily, but you can do if people want to go to a bit more of a social.
Other questions on development and debugging with blocks? And of course, that's a completely different thing.
That's a whole talk in itself.
There was questions on processes for block development, and another one which was how do you handle multiple header types and various layouts elegantly.
I did have a think about that actually, Johnny.
Briefly, Johnny.
I've got a few ideas, but maybe I'll talk to you about that later. Yeah, maybe tomorrow or something.
So maybe those ones are a bit too difficult to cover. What about anyone else want to answer the where do you see theme development going? And what do you recommend people do or don't do? My brief reply was, don't hold your breath. Any improvement on that answer?
Learn a bit of Gutenberg, learn a bit of ACF. There's still going to be custom blocks. There's still so many blocks that aren't available that need to be available.
The question came from a plugin developer who has given us a talk, Tony Blacker, and I think the answer is the same as everyone else. We're looking at full site editing and seeing that it doesn't quite do what we expect it to do, and we can't actually work out what it does do, but it's going to be a bit different from how it is now. And there will be a lot of themes that won't be keeping up with Gutenberg, and you'll suddenly say, I need to change from my theme because it can't do all of the things that Gutenberg is trying to give me the option for it to do.
Yeah.
And at that point in time,
I think for headers and footers, you don't need to change them all the time. So Yeah, it's been
Yeah,
interesting.
so
how
if
they
you're,
kind of
if
do
you're
that.
trying to work with the new capability and your theme is the thing that's preventing you from doing it, then what do you have to do? Switch theme, and how much is that going to cost? That's a tricky one, isn't it?
And we'll have to go to monthly WordPress theme releases. So it'll have to be 2021.1, 2021.2. That's the only way it's going to work, isn't it? Once a year isn't going to be good enough, is it?
But they're updating all the past themes as well. So right back to 2010, I think they're going to be adding in the patterns capability for those themes.
Okay.
I keep trying to wrap my brain around this question. I think I'm like everyone else in the world, but I would love to, after the recording stops, like really dig into that, because I think that I'm trying to work that out for myself. And I think a lot of other people in the room might be as well. So it's not so much an editor level as much as a developer level question, I think.
Well, we'll stop recording very soon then. So, and then I moved on to a whole load of rhetorical questions, which I don't think we need to answer ever.
I have another like editor question. Because I'm a developer, I find editing frustrating sometimes because I want to just flip back into development mode, and there are circumstances where I'm not allowed to do that by various people in my work team. So with that said, I find like selecting the blocks that I want to select to group together into like a reusable block or into a block group to be like really like a frustrating experience. And I think it might be just because I don't know how to do it right. Is there somebody else?
No, I mean, I think drag and drop, I just find it a bit buggy. Like, I think things like that are going to be improving soon.
So, okay, so like I'm not the only one who feels that way. Like sometimes I'm just
no,
like,
definitely not. We had on a previous meetup somebody who was having real trouble trying to get a group to behave the way they wanted it to behave, and I think it's just one of those things that's just not quite right at the moment.
Something about it, like if I try to like, for instance, take 3 blocks and move them into a column, but you should be able to do that, right? You should be able to take blocks that aren't part of a column, group them together, and then.
I've never managed to do that myself.
No, I'm like, bah, bah. and then I'm like, I should rewrite the whole core editor, because I have like this like, bug, like, but yeah, so
spend $199 and buy Divi lifetime license. Honestly, even though many times when I would gladly throw the computer out the window because of Divi,
yeah,
start to get to grips with it. 3 text modules, bang, 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 into a column, job done, what you wanted to do in 2 seconds.
But I disagree with that also. So I sit on the, neither is a perfect solution yet.
No, correct, I agree.
And so but
so it's going to be 5 years. My prediction, it's going to be 5 years before the block editor gets anything like as capable as either of the mainstream page builders. It's not going to be next year, is it?
I want y'all to turn this recording off and let me like talk.
Oh, sorry. Did I just get that recorded, me saying that? Okay.
You totally did.
Yes. Yeah.
All goes quiet now.
Julia's got a question, Belinda.
I'm sure, Meg, you can help us edit the bits out if we need to. So
good. Okay, so you're telling me I can just talk freely, like?
Yeah, go for it, Meg.
I think that if everyone would prefer to have the recording off, I'm sure we can switch that off.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can edit to the end of the main questions. I'm sure, or Meg, we can ask very nicely if you can help us edit to the end of the questions.
Sure, I can.
Okay, all right. So I think the recording's now stopped.
No, not yet. Is it?
No. Let's just wait for her to do that.
Stop recording. Here we go. Right.